Okay, let's make sure this is okay. It's on.
Testing.
One, two,
Yeah,
one,
this one
two.
works.
Hello? Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Good morning, everyone. How are we? We're good. I'm going to be very interactive, so if I don't hear something, I will ask again, letting you guys know beforehand. Okay, cool. It's nice to meet all of you guys. My name is Izrael Appiah. I am part of Young Creators. I lead on youth development, impact, and finance. I won't talk too much about Young Creators because we have someone on the panel that will do that for me. However, our purpose is to make sure that we keep barriers down to allow creatives to have an opportunity to create and express themselves in the sector. I am very, very humbled and excited for today's discussion, especially to be amongst peers that, for one, I know, which is really cool. It's like, I didn't actually see myself presenting, but also, I enjoy all of the art that they create. So, yeah, I'm really excited for this. So, I'm gonna go in terms of, actually, Tamara, we'll start with you.
I knew, I could feel it. I could feel it.
You've been thrown in there.
So this is what's gonna happen. Our speakers are gonna introduce themselves with their name, and you're all gonna be like, hi, their name. You know what I'm saying? So if it was like, hi, my name is Izrael. Okay. They get it, yeah? Cool. Brilliant.
You were born for
This
BBC.
is amazing.
A little bit, you know. Okay, well, the floor is yours.
My name's Tamara Barton Campbell.
Hi, Tamara.
Do you want me to say anything
Is that-
else? Is that...
Yeah, maybe a little bit about what you do.
Okay, so I'm Tamara Barton Campbell. I'm the founder of Renaissance Studios and the Rebirth Project. So Renaissance Studios is a production company, and the Rebirth Project is a project that we set up in lockdown to help young people, young creatives get into the film and entertainment industry.
Hello, I'm Ben Cross.
Hi, Ben.
Wow, I love that. That was loud. So I set up CloudX, which is, it was born out of like the illegal rave culture in Brixton in South London. Yeah, I was a wrong'un as a teenager, throwing illegal raves. And it's now a record label, an arts institute, which has got like photography studios and recording studios. And it's like the largest festival for hip-hop, R&B, and alt-rap, which is in Crystal Palace Bowl this year, August the 2nd. Please do come. 10,000 people, so there's plenty of space, I think.
Good morning, class. My name's Johnny Lee. I'm a commercial artist. I go by the name of Mr. Lee, and I basically create art, and I usually help. I create art to help brands tell stories.
Thank
Morning.
you,
Good morning.
Morning, guys. My name's Yasmin. I co-founded YCUK. We're a creative and production agency led by young people trying to make the creative sector more accessible to young people, particularly those who don't have traditional access into the industry. Over to you.
Brilliant. Okay, so now that we are all acquainted, I'm going to go one by one. I'm joking, I won't do that with you guys. So today's talk is about using culture as a superpower. We are very excited to be able to discuss this with you guys. This is a topic that I feel like doesn't get spoken about enough. It doesn't have enough position in terms of whether it's events or just even having like a sit-down one-to-one with your best mate about your origins, what you do, your reasons and your passions, and where they even come from to begin with. So this is going to be like almost like a little casual family talk. Nothing too serious, so don't worry, guys. There's nothing pressing. I won't go too far. But you guys have all been prepped, so it's okay. You know what I mean? So I'm going to start off with origin stories. I'd like to discuss everyone's why. So for those of you who don't know what whys are, it's simply your reason for being, whether that's a creative, a person, your mission, the origin story, or just your mission. I feel like I said mission already. If anything, I should double down on mission because everyone should have some form of mission through vocation. So this time, we're going to go in reverse. Yasmin, if I can know a little about your personal why.
For me, my why, I was thinking about how I was going to answer this, and I'm literally going to make it up right now because it's just coming to me as I'm saying it, but it's realizing that you can do more and acting on it. And if you can do more in a way that's positive for yourself and others, then you should. And I think that's what motivates me to do what I'm doing now. And that realization is what almost awakened me as an adolescent. So that's probably my personal mission.
Oh, that's incredible. Mr. Lee?
So, just to kind of go around the houses a little bit, I would say that it took me quite a long time to kind of realize what my why is. And I'm a person who kind of learns by doing things rather than, necessarily having a plan at the start and kind of executing a plan. So it was by doing what I do that I kind of came back around to my why. Because I realized quite recently, maybe the start of the year, that a lot of the stuff that I do, and the reason why I'm sitting here on this particular panel is because a lot of the stuff that I do pertains to my culture. Because I'm British-born Chinese, was born here in the UK, and we're, I say, among the least represented groups in the UK. You could say, when's the last time you saw a Chinese person on the newspaper, heard news about a Chinese person, or that kind of thing? That's not a sub-story, I'm just saying we don't really speak that often. People don't hear our voices and our stories. So through doing my art, I naturally fell into using my culture to tell the stories. And then I also do a few other things. I have a community project as well, which is for East and Southeast Asian guys. And then at the start of the year, I realized that my why was I'm trying to push narratives, create narratives that don't exist, let people know about our stories, at the same time as kind of having a voice and just letting people know that we're not just a monolithic kind of group, and that we have different stories, we do different things, and I realized that I just want people to realize that and kind of see us for what we are as well. So that's not everything, but that's a big part of it.
I mean, that's amazing. I feel like that's a very pure journey you've been on to come to that why, which is just really incredible. So
thank you.
Yeah, I've known you for about 3 years now, so to hear that it's really inspiring, especially as a young person, sort of kind of figuring out my personal why as well. So.
Yeah, I think you don't necessarily need to know when you start. You just gotta keep doing the thing, and it will become apparent as you progress on your journey, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Ben?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I feel like it resonates a lot, both in terms of what you were saying about identity and also working out as you go along. I think for me, I guess the why is connected to our origin story. And so the way I started was that, when I was 15, I wanted to have a 16th birthday party. As my best mate, who's my now business partner. I am queer, British, Polish, Jewish. I have a very strict mother. He's Ghanaian and has a very strict mother. They were both absolutely no way. So we went out, we found a legal space in Brixton, and we threw a party. This was in the days, and I'm dating myself now, I'm a bit older than you guys, but I'm 31. This is in the days where Facebook was first becoming popularized, and so we put this event up on Facebook, and it went totally viral. So we thought we're going to get about 100 people there, charge them £3 each, we'll pay the deposit. By the way, the deposit, at that time, at that age, the deposit is a hell of a lot of money. So I was like, how could I possibly pay this? So I'm hoping that we're going to make the money back. This event goes viral on Facebook, and 1,500 people turn up. The police are there. In fact, they don't even kick everyone out, because it was Brixton back in the day. And back in the day, you don't really want a bunch of 15-year-olds, 1,500 of them, running around the back streets of Brixton. So, that moment for us was it was wild, and it was interesting, it was crazy, because we threw this party, and all of a sudden there were people of all races, genders, sexualities, body types, everyone was there. It was the first time I'd ever seen anyone cross-dressing, first time I'd ever seen anyone trans. I was like, this is a whole space that really feels like the tapestry of South London, and somehow I was behind it. And I think the reason why I feel so close to that origin story, aside from just nostalgia, is that it feels like everything we do now, it tries to bring that into what we do. And what I mean by that is both creating spaces for people who are probably previously marginalized, deliberately marginalized, I might say, and also creating spaces for those kind of storytellers. And I think, you know, that personal why, I guess, connects into like identity and community in a larger way in that sense.
I mean, that is, for one, astonishing. I can only imagine what the rave was like throwing the party. So,
It was a good party.
man. When I was like, let me just say 5 years older, I might have seen it. Tamara?
Well, I think about my why. I think about when I was younger. I was 11 when I first engaged in film and television. We used to go to a space called YCTV, Youth Cable Television, which was set up in Ladbroke Grove. And I think equity also comes into it for me as well because of the opportunities we were able to gain through YCTV. So for example, we were able to do things like sing with David Bowie. We were able to have workshops with people like, Charlene, help me for a second, sorry, Ruby Wax, for example. So Harrison Ford. So very, very surreal opportunities, but opportunities that only came about because of this experience that was put on. And I think to myself, if that didn't happen, then would I even be on this journey that I'm on now? Potentially I'd be finding another way into the industry, or potentially I would have waited for lockdown that's when there was an uprising of diversity. So I think to myself, actually equity has always been a big part. Wanting better has always been a big part of me, like looking at my surroundings and trying to understand why representation of myself wasn't on television. I wasn't being able to be seen in a certain way, nor was my culture shared in a certain way, or most probably more in an accurate way, should I say. And maybe the people telling the stories weren't from our authentic backgrounds, if that makes sense. So I think my why has always been about spreading equity and making sure that everybody has the opportunities that I once had. Because even for me, I still think it's quite surreal to be on, say, a David Bowie album, but at the same time, I think opportunities to work with people in the creative industry should be more available than they have been. And I think what we're doing as a community is we're doing better, but I do also think that the opportunity shouldn't feel like it's only for certain people from certain backgrounds. So I think a big part of my why is just kind of breaking that down and making sure everybody has opportunity. I hope that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I think the thing that I really liked most about your why was the fact that it was through looking at why your previous environmental factors and circumstances, rather than allowing to follow through with that, the flow of what it was. You actually really analyzed and inspected on what it was and why the way it was. Sometimes as a creative, it's very difficult to stop and stand still and just have a look at your surroundings. So to be able to do that and then begin the journey is incredible.
Yeah,
so.
thank you.
Okay, well, thank you guys. On to the next question. You guys have transitioned this greatly into the next question, so you guys are making my job super easy. So we're gonna talk about culture for a bit. It was brought up a couple times. I would like to know, what does culture mean to you? Now that can be as an individual, it can be for the company that you're a part of. What is culture? Start off with Yaz.
For me, I think culture, even in a biological sense, is creating, or a positive culture at least, is creating an environment for growth and the right type of growth. And I think the right culture allows every different form of microorganism in a biological ecosystem to develop and thrive. And to me, that's what culture should be about, is fostering positive spaces where everyone can come together and be the most authentic and positive version of themselves.
And when you say authentic, just out of curiosity, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think when I speak about being authentic, it's more about being comfortable in whatever capacity you're in. You don't have to be the best version of yourself or this type of character. You just kind of have to show up and have permission to just be you. Whatever that is, even, I don't know who I am, definitely still figuring it out. I'm way too young to know that. But I think that's okay. And having a space and an environment where that's allowed and everyone has equity in that space, as you were talking about, it shouldn't just be one type of person is able to thrive. A positive culture should allow that cross-pollination so that we can all grow and learn from each other. And that's sort of what I mean by that.
So eloquently said. Mr. Lee, what does culture mean to you?
So culture, I feel like my understanding of culture is a bit different now from, it's constantly changing. I wouldn't say it's constantly changing, but it's evolving, right? So I used to think that obviously culture is a set of ideals and practices within a group, right? But I'm also understanding now that when it comes to speaking about my culture, your culture, these could mean different things to different people. And culture could be like on a big scale or a small scale. Like, for example, I'm a father now. So I have a culture within my house. Like I try and set a culture within my house, which I think is going to be the most beneficial for my little team. You get it? So it's like, whereas I might be part of a larger culture, my household itself, there's a culture right there. My workplace, there's a culture there. So we have the power to build the cultures that we want. Yeah. And as a father, I'm like the architect of the culture in my house. That's very powerful. Yeah. And we have the power to do that. So it's really a sliding scale for me now. It's like there's culture on a larger scale, but that's not as important to me as it once was. Even though I've built a lot of my career off Chinese culture, I've been able to draw on that kind of power, that history, 5,000 years of artwork and, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, I'm an individual myself. I don't need to behave in necessarily an exact certain type of way because of where I'm from and, because I can see things from other cultures that I can appreciate, I can learn from that. So I don't know if I answered the question.
No, absolutely, you are. Keep going.
But I feel like it's not just a one-size-fits-all definition. I think I'll leave it there. Yeah.
No, I mean, that was well said. There's culture. Like, culture can be found everywhere in everything that you do, and it's like that stepping stone for the plan, for the strategy, for system, for peace of mind. Especially like, as you said, like being the architect when it comes to like your family. Yeah. It's a lot of things they have to do to keep that intact and to maintain. So having that culture there allows you to like always return to a point where if things do get shaky or you don't know what to do, well, what's my culture? What have I set in stone prior to that? What do I want it to be?
Yeah, I mean, I actually in my house I have the surname of my family, and like when you're kids, you have that thing and it's got the word and then it's got other words coming off of it. So we've got our kind of family values written in the house, going off the surname of words that pertain to the culture that we're trying to foster for our children in the house. So I think it's good to know it's good to set that out. It's like a manifesto, right? It's good to know what it is that you're trying to do. Do you know what I mean? I still feel like I didn't answer the question, but...
No, you're doing great. Yeah, thank you so much. Ben, culture.
It is such an amorphous thing, so it's hard to define. But when I think of culture, I think of stories, and I think of storytelling, and I think of the stories that we tell ourselves of ourselves and the stories that we tell other people of communication. And I guess we here all work in sort of culture and art, and I think what has always been so interesting to me about storytelling is that I studied literature at university, and I read this amazing book called God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. She wrote this in 1998, and she was South Asian. She was from South India, and she came from a village, and she knew no one famous, no one in the industry, and this is when the Booker Prize had first opened up outside of just being in England, but to English-speaking languages and English-speaking writers. And so Arundhati Roy, this completely unknown writer, writes this story about a little village in South India, and it wins the Booker Prize, and it's read by millions of people around the world. And I read that book about a culture that is so completely different to me, to anything that I've experienced, and I felt seen in it, and I felt understood by it, and I felt that I understood the characters in it. And I guess the fact that that kind of transcended geography, time, culture, in so many ways, like it was just a really important moment for me because it showed me that ultimately that's what culture and storytelling and art can do. It can transcend like something where you get to a point of just like humanity and of like communication between people. So yeah, to me that's culture, a great story.
Brilliant story. I think just even, we're gonna get into this later on, but having culture to share and making that accessible for other people to develop their own culture as well is such an important point, because we all have our individual like stories and circumstances, but what like the human aspect of us that allows us to be social also allows us to share like not just experiences but like the emotions and the passions that come with that, and that's really like inspirational. Like what you read probably like fueled something inside of you to understand that maybe it wasn't the day after that you started developing it, but it took like there was a part of you that made space for culture to develop through that book. And I think that in itself is really like important to know, because you need to be able to slowly like, sometimes again, slow down, not just analyze around you, but also start to look in as well and realize, oh, this is actually evolving like within me as well. And it's actually gonna start like transmitting outwards. So yeah, thank you so much. Tamara.
Hi.
Hey.
So for me, culture is community. That's a big part of culture for me. And I think about myself and how I've grown as well. I think I'm a black woman, originally from West London, but now living in Brixton. Christian, but love a bit of dancehall.
Come on.
The worst kind. Do you know what I mean? So, so that's a complete juxtaposition there already. My mum's husband was Pakistani, so our food in our house was that mixture of Pakistani food as well as Jamaican food, like a patty with, you know, something else in it. So it's a very mixture of everything. And I say that to say, when I think about the kind of stories that we tell, for example, the Sickle Cell Diaries, it's very specific to our culture, but also our spin on it is the evolution of that, which is how something like that, which specifically affected the black community, now affects everybody. And I think, other than my team reining me in a little bit, sometimes when I have some ideas, they're like, oh, that's a little bit too on the derogatory Jamaican side. I think my experiences shape definitely the art that we create and the culture, because even though I say all of these things, when you come into Renaissance Studios, we have everybody from all different walks of life within our space affecting our art and the way we see things. And I think a lot of my background or my growing up, I can see that now, the footprints of that, whether it's in my work or the people that I meet or the kind of things I want to speak about, specifically Jamaican derogatory dancehall music, which I really love, and then go to church on Sunday. Big juxtaposition.
Don't worry, I've been there as well, that's right. Oh, that's brilliant. I think, again, being able to have that moment to be able to invite someone into your culture, but again, acknowledging the juxtaposition, because culture is something that is allowed to change, but also to have space for other things. I feel like if it's too heavily focused, then it becomes an obligation to be perfect, and as a creative, being meticulous about anything just drags the whole process down. It's no longer enjoyable.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and I would also say it's about finding your tribe as well within that culture, because actually, just because somebody is this and whatever, it doesn't mean everybody is going to be the same. I think you mentioned before, we're not a monolith in that sense. And I do think culture does evolve, it does change, it does, you know, it does kind of shake a little bit. And I think that that's quite important, because we're always creating. So therefore, how we see something today isn't necessarily how we'll see stuff in the future. You know, I think young creatives do change what we think culture actually is. And I think what you were saying was really important. You've got your culture in your house that you're creating, even though you have this global culture or cultures within your space. Actually, you can still create that.
Absolutely.
I think it could be quite restrictive to try and just remain within the larger culture, because there's always been room for space, and like humans are group animals, obviously, so generally people try and conform as much as possible, but when certain things get adopted, they can get absorbed into the culture. There's so many things like you're speaking about food. For example, food gets absorbed into culture, and then it just becomes part of the mix. But that takes time, and it takes it almost needs to happen quietly in the background.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. So, with that in mind, we've spoken about what culture is to you. How does culture affect the work that you create? As creatives, we have, or should I say, we deal with commercial briefs, we deal with personal briefs. But the main purpose, at least for me, and you can let me know if there's a different purpose for you, but it's to have that imprint of yourself within what you create. And for me, I would kind of pinpoint a bit of that, like not, at least 50%. I'll put about half of that to culture. So how does culture reflect in the work that you create?
I'm happy to start and also kind of not challenge what you say, but disagree with some of what you said, because I don't think everything I create needs to have a bit of me in it, depending on what I'm creating and for who. Like, I couldn't completely take away my voice from something, because to do it, it will be there naturally. But I think on certain projects, at least that I've done commercially at YCUK, my cultural experience, or the project in particular, it's not relevant to the brief or the client. So how culture influences my work, sometimes it's not about my culture. It's about creating an environment where other people feel like they can speak on their own culture or express or make work about that particular narrative. So I think it's knowing when your voice is needed and when your voice is needed to allow someone else to speak. And I think that's really important. And there's your personal culture, and then like a work culture, in like an environment, how you feel on the project, in the office, in the studio. That atmosphere is really important, and it's key to enable people to create and be authentic and make good work ultimately. So that was a bit of a meandering answer, but that's where I think culture is relevant to work, for me at least.
Absolutely, and thank you for challenging, because that's what this is about. Again, I'm figuring this out alongside you guys, so.
You're talking about like facilitating, or just kind of being a vehicle to allow the main voice to speak when you're kind of, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like at YCUK, there's definitely been projects that we've worked on that you don't need, to be honest, like a well-spoken white girl's voice as the main voice in that space. There's a lot of spaces where that has been championed in broader society. Sometimes it is relevant. We did the Violence Against Women and Girls campaign, and that was a space where you do need a young female's voice. But we've also worked on projects where we're championing a different culture, a different community, the black community. Me as a white person in that space should enable other black people to speak on issues that affect them, and me to champion that voice, that narrative, when it's relevant. But I don't need to use my culture to dictate that space and how that goes. I should leave that space for others.
So that's
Good to hear that, yeah.
That's interesting to me as well, because I guess like we're all creatives, but we're also curators in different ways, and that speaks to like it. That also speaks to me about your culture, like knowing you and also what you guys do and having worked with you before. It speaks to me about your culture, that you know when to like take a step back, or like when to platform someone else. And so interestingly to me, like that is a part of, maybe it's not your personal identity, but it seems to me that that is the culture of what you guys do, and that is like at the core of your values as a person. So yeah, it's interesting.
No, thank you. I think that's where it comes back to the work culture, not necessarily how my culture influences the output of the work, but how can I make that environment as equitable, positive, and creative as possible so that everyone can speak and output positively?
I think you could apply that in every aspect of your life as well. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just got to shut up and...
Yeah, exactly.
And just be a good, whatever, wingman, or, you know, be a good facilitator of what's happening, just support. Sometimes you're not the main character, you're the supporting role. You got to know when that is, I guess.
Definitely.
But yeah, my answer to that question, I'm going to keep it on culture as to pertaining to where I'm from. I think that I've been quite fortunate because, full transparency, like obviously, like I was saying before, the Chinese culture is not really celebrated. It's in the media, it's all negativity and that kind of thing when it pertains to, you know, China and, you know, the politics. So I think I've actually been quite fortunate because I've managed to take the elements that people like, that I like, and use those in my artwork. So it's almost like I have a massive well of culture, art, iconography, and as a commercial artist, that's like it's like a massive inventory that I can draw from to sort of take it, change it, adjust it to my taste, to my story. Just like food, going back to the food again, you can adjust the seasoning. You can, you know, you adjust it to your taste and to who you're feeding. So it's like I have a lot of ingredients. Just to carry on with the food thing, I have a lot of ingredients and I can create the dish that I want to eat, but I can make sure that everyone else likes it too. Yeah. So that's how I see my culture. It's like a fully stocked fridge, freezer, cupboard, pantry. And because the market's not saturated with it right now, that gives me as the chef, I'm taking it far, but as the chef, I have a lot of possibilities for the dishes I want to create. So, you know, so I really find it a blessing. And I guess for me, the way I've always looked at things is like, you might be kind of, people might not be able to hear your voice or really know who you are, but that's a power in itself, because that means I get to create the story I want to create, because no one's looking at me and necessarily having they might have a certain story in mind, but I can change it. So I think that's powerful in itself. So there's always a way to maneuver in this world, even when things, you know, it's that thing where you look out one side of the train, it's sunny, you look out the other side of the train and it's cloudy. Well, I'm gonna sit on this side and look out the sunny side then. You know, that's what I've got to say.
That's incredible. Thank you. You've made me really hungry, but powerful.
Can you tell?
I was going to add to that, actually. I was going to say, I agree, but also specializing in your culture also can become your superpower. So I think if we go back to something like the Sickle Cell Diaries, because not many people know what sickle cell is, that's allowed us to specialize it, being a black woman whose sister has sickle cell. Mm-hmm. So, for example, like even today, our younger sister, Kyra, was supposed to be here with us, but she's in the hospital because she's having a sickle cell crisis. That whole experience for us is quite challenging, but we end up specializing in the subject matter. When we're speaking to the nurses, we're always educating them on what sickle cell is. Sometimes they Google it in front of us because they don't really know. They're not sure about the pain management. They're not sure about how that is. So for us, for example, our superpower is actually being a black woman who specializes and understands what diseases specifically tackle our community. And then that way we're able to educate everybody else on that. I think the growth of that, or the evolution of that, is how we've then found people who are not specifically from our culture and our background who also have sickle cell. So I think in that space there, we were able to break a story with ITN News this year about the evolution of sickle cell. And that wouldn't have been able to have come from other communities unless they would have had lived experiences like ourselves. Our sister is 26 years old. Her first sickle cell crisis was when she was 2 years old. And I think unless you have that hands-on experience, that's when it becomes harder to understand that space. So I think what you're saying with regards to not necessarily having to specialize in something, I think absolutely. And then there's also a time where you have to specialize in something to bring about that education and understanding of something that specifically affects our communities.
I guess, when you were talking just then, I was also thinking about, so I guess you're talking about like practical things and being like really specialized in a culture and a community. But I also was just thinking about, in general, taking a step back, like culture as a superpower, like as an idea. What's so interesting to me is that if we, like, rather than talking about what I do in music, if we look at other arts, like if we look at film or TV, like we were talking about Supercell earlier, or if we look at films like, you know, for me, Moonlight or Call Me By Your Name, these are films that often speak for and are by communities that were like deliberately, historically marginalized. And when I watched Call Me By Your Name as someone who's queer, like it felt so simple and like a breath of fresh air. It felt completely effortless. And it obviously made as did Moonlight, made such a huge cultural impact and a huge commercial impact. And so I think, you know, telling also just very simple stories about communities and cultures that have been, you know, deliberately pushed aside can also just have such a humongous cultural impact. And I think that's also what you guys do at Renaissance.
100%. And I think if we go back to Supercell, sickle cell has never been spoken about on that level before. You know, we've campaigned about sickle cell, we're speaking about it, but it's never been spoken on that level before. So now you're looking at a British film that actually is #1 in Netflix, and now you're educating a whole community of people who are familiar but unfamiliar also with sickle cell, but also putting a really positive spin on it and saying that actually it's a superpower. And now it's a cultural shift on what that is. You know, it's an underfunded illness. You know, people do not know how to tackle it, but because it's growing, because of communities, all of our communities are mixing more. Actually, what's happening is it's evolving quicker than the education around it. So I guess back to answering your question, there are definitely some times when who you are specializes in a subject matter, and we shouldn't shy away from those things, because actually you can educate people, but also you can evolve the story, and you can evolve the story collaboratively.
That's well said. So with that in mind then, I'd like to reference the cultural architect phrase that you used again, Mr. Lee, because in some way, whether you guys see it or not, all of you here are cultural leaders in what you do. So whether that's pioneering, facilitating, making space for others to express culture, the environment, or just even the legacy that you want to leave behind, the question I have to you is, do you feel that there's some form of responsibility to uphold whether it's your culture or the culture that's needed for whatever you create or whatever's being created?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of touches on what Tamara was just talking about. When you can, you should, and sometimes it's essential to, because what is there is deliberately overlooked, written out, unspoken about, not funded correctly. And if you can see that imbalance and have the capacity to challenge that imbalance, absolutely you should. Like, if you see someone get onto the tube or the train and they're struggling to walk and you have a seat, you should stand up and let them sit down. It's just common sense to me. So I think it's essential that you do that when you're able to. Otherwise, you're just looking at a problem and an imbalance and leaving it where it is and saying, oh, that's imbalanced. Like, what does that do? So, yeah, I don't have much more to say than yes, you do.
No, I mean, that is perfect. I think you hit the nail on the head, especially the idea of, you said it's common sense, but I was always raised to know that common sense isn't common. So what you end up having is there might be people that see a situation, but what it ends up being is just them seeing the situation.
And I think it comes back to your personal mission and your why and how that influences what you do on a day-to-day basis. If you see something and you feel empowered or activated enough to make a difference and stand up against it, then that's where you see that action coming, but it comes from your internal why, your reason for being, and maybe your ability to empathize with people in different situations to you. Yeah.
Just want to say very quickly, sorry guys, that is time up. Thank you so much. Fantastic conversation. Do you want to just have a very quick Q&A with the audience? You've got about 5 minutes.
Time flew,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, for sure. We will open it up to the audience, but please feel free to also ask us any questions. We're here the whole day as well.
Hello. Oh, hello. I'm Danny. Thank you so much for such an inspiring talk. I kind of feel overwhelmed. It feels like you guys are very much at the forefront of leading what culture means, the definition, how it's evolving, creating those spaces. I would love to know, what do you do to supercharge yourself in response to the responsibility that you have being a leader at that forefront? How do you look after yourself in that space?
Did we all hear that? Just making sure.
I think how do you supercharge yourself with all that in mind?
With all the responsibility that you have being in the space that you're at.
I think it's about just knowing who you are and understanding that you are of the culture. If you're representing a culture, then you are of the culture. It's about knowing the culture and just having faith in yourself and understanding yourself. And I think in doing that, you will be supercharging yourself. You will be tapping into what you're of, where you're from, and that will manifest in your outward actions. That's what I think anyway. What do you guys think?
I think for me, it's just taking things day by day, because I think there's a lot of things that change in our culture, especially as now being based in Brixton, even local culture can sometimes be quite overwhelming as well. So I think for me, it's taking things day by day. I have a really supportive team as well, so we're always speaking, we're always talking. And I think also the kind of production company that we are also raises a lot of questions internally anyway, just because of we are quite diverse, that maybe there's not much diverse stories been told and but also there's also barriers in that too. So I think for us it's about always talking, always having conversations, looking at the culture and looking at community and seeing how the landscape of things change, specifically in the industry as well. So it's just, day by day is our slogan, specifically for this season as well.
We've got time for one more. Anybody else with a question? Yeah.
Hiya, my name's Louis. Just on the topic of obviously culture, being ever changing and putting a bit of a work hat on. I'm from an agency background, so IMA.global, shameless plug, look us up. But from a work sense, obviously, work that we put out, that's forever, but it can be influenced by culture, moral culture, personal culture that's ever changing. And I just wondered if you guys have ever had an experience where maybe you've put out a piece of work that you look back and maybe you don't necessarily agree with now, or you think, we need to adapt X or Y or whatever it might be to bring it more in line with culture that you believe in now?
If I think of, for example, I worked on The Intent too. So that's quite a thriller, crime type project. If I think about today, the kind of projects that we need to tell now, I think they could be the opposite of that, if that makes sense. So at that time, it was fine to tell those types of stories. Didn't have a problem with it at all. Quite proud of our work. But what I would say now, because of the change in our communities in the sense of what people want now, the appetite of what people want, the kind of programs that people want to see most probably lean more towards a supercell type, uplifting, positive type programming. So I think definitely there is some work where you think actually we could be overserved there, and actually now the types of stories that we need and the appetite that is there needs to be a bit different. And I also think that with some of the advertising stuff that I previously done before as well, actually I would have changed some of those things too.
Thanks so much. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Ladies and gents, please give everybody on stage a round of applause.